Are you ready to enter the egg? What? I need to go in that thing? No, I'm not ready. Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, I've missed your lovely faces, but it's time once more to enter the lands between and even beyond, as we are currently around a week and a half away from the release of what is promising to be an absolutely massive DLC in Shadow of the Erdtree. It seems like the perfect time to talk about how to prepare for this expansion itself, both in-game and out. First, and most obviously, buy the DLC. You can't play it if you don't own it. Duh. Second, kill Mohg. I know a lot of players went through absolutely everything the game had to offer, but more than any Souls game in the past, Elden Ring reached an extremely large audience, including a ton of people who quite enjoyed the game but didn't dive in enough to find all the optional content, including Mohg, who's not only one of the demigods, so one of the major bosses of the game, even if he is optional, and importantly, he actually no longer is optional, provided that you want to play Shadow of the Erdtree, as we begin the expansion from his arena after he's dead. Past that, though, what seems to be a bit lesser known is that you also need to defeat another optional demigod boss, Radahn. If you didn't fight him in your first playthrough, you're just missing out. He is one of my favorite boss designs in video game history, really, and his death is also a requirement for the DLC. As for why, that will probably become clear while playing through the DLC, as it isn't quite as obvious as Mohg. Past that, then, there's a question of how you want to approach Shadow of the Erdtree. Should you play it on your original game save from back when you first played? Should you do it on New Game Plus if you're already in New Game Plus on your main save? Or should you go out of your way to set up a whole new save in preparation for the DLC? Well, the simple answer for most people is play it from your main save. The absolutely ideal version of the experience will be on a fresh new save that is prepared just for this purpose, one where you have a character archetype in mind from the beginning, know what base game weapon you want to use to get to the DLC so that you can collect as many important things as quickly as possible, while also using as few resources as possible, so you still have things like a massive collection of larval tears, for example, so that you can respec your character at your heart's desires to match any particularly cool weapon or sorcery or incantation that happens to catch your eye, and even avoid using things like the walking mausoleums so that you have as many boss remembrance duplications left as possible for the DLC bosses specifically and for their equipment, as we know for a fact that there will be new remembrance bosses. That said, doing all of that is like a 15 to 20 hour process at absolute minimum, and that's if you forego a lot of the parts of the game that could help increase your player power, so it is a relatively hefty time investment to go for. Basically, that's the best choice for your long-term Shadow of the Erdtree experience, but for most average players, just going forward from your main save will be the best way. That said, it's worth mentioning that if you are in New Game Plus already, you'll be essentially just committing yourself to an already enhanced difficulty version of the expansion from the get-go in your first time through it, as it will already be scaling with the New Game Plus level that you are on in the first place. But it entirely depends on the experience that you want to have yourself. I'm just laying out the pros and cons of each choice. On a similar note, get your bearings. Regardless of what you choose to do as far as the save that you choose to progress from, sometime over the next week and a bit you should probably spend at least an hour or two just going around fighting some enemies, getting back used to the combat so that you don't walk into Shadow of the Erdtree feeling completely rusty and have a rough experience to start with. Past that, this goes for people more who played just the base game more casually than others, and it's make a build. I'm not going to tell you what to play, what build to make specifically by any means, other than saying if you didn't consider something like this, try it now. Pick a weapon or a set of spells that particularly speaks to you, and use one of the million builds that exist out there to turn it into an absolute powerhouse, because it's one hell of an experience to have a proper build in this game, and something that will, without a doubt, make your run smoother into the DLC from the very beginning. We have tons of builds to choose from on this channel, or you could go out and make your own. The world's your oyster, really, but I do recommend putting something together for this. And on top of that, as part of this section as well, do any optional stuff that you might have missed. Maybe you didn't kill Miquella in your first playthrough for whatever reason. Now's the perfect time to do so. Fight her, get that experience that you didn't have to do before, and also get yourself actually just ready to fight in Shadow of the Erdtree by fighting something hard like that. Past that, get your bearings, bell bearings. There will be a ton, and I mean a frickin' ton, of new weapons in this DLC. New weapon types that these will be within as well, so to put it simply, even if you think that you are committed to being fully in love with a weapon from the base game, and you think that you want to use it for the whole DLC, let's just say you're probably going to find something that piques your interest and changes your mind. So you want to make sure that you have all of these smithing stone bell bearings, all these somber stone bell bearings, so that you can buy the smithing stones that you need to upgrade new weapons as they speak to you, as well as the ghost toward related bearings 2 for upgrading your spirit summons 2, as we'll be having new spirit summons as well. Similarly to those, we have preparing your chosen save file in a more obvious way, which is things like collecting less permanent items than bell bearings, getting a nice pile of items like larval tears, which I mentioned earlier, so you can reset your stats as and when you want to through the journey, but also things like the Ancient Dragon Smithing Stones, of which there are 13 in the game, or the Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stones, of which there are 8. So these are limited to a point where you have to choose the weapons you want to upgrade to the absolute top level, but not so limited that you can't build up a small pile of them in anticipation of the DLC dropping and, wanting to use them on new weapons. Of course, there will likely be more of these in the DLC area, but if you already have them, you can already upgrade the new weapons the second they drop. One more thing a lot of players are wondering is what level should you be going into this DLC? And there's a long answer and a short answer, but let's talk long answer first. There was a preview event recently where people got an advanced hands-on bit of playtime with the expansion itself, and within this, people were all given level 150 characters to play with at the very beginning of the expansion. You could say that that implies the start of the expansion is scaled to level 150. You could say that it implies the end of the expansion is 150 scaled, and that they just didn't want the players in the preview to hit any overly difficult walls through their 3 hours of play, and we should actually be probably lower than 150 to begin with. Honestly though, there's no direct and correct answer other than to say, if you've killed Moog on your character, you are strong enough for the start of the DLC at the very least. And I would definitely say anything above level 150 is probably over-leveling at least the start, unless you're in New Game Plus of course. But some people like to over-level things, and there's nothing wrong with that either. So that's the sort of general range of expectation that we have, but you should do whatever feels comfortable and fun for you and your experience. On top of that, another thing that many longer-term players would already have done, but I do want to make sure I mention it for anyone who didn't fully scour the base game, is make sure to collect all of your golden seeds and your sacred tears. These are the collectible items that you use to increase both the amount of crimson and cerulean flasks that you can carry at a time, but also the amount that you recover with each use of your flasks. And that's just such an incredibly important thing to make sure that you have done before the DLC, as regardless of any part of your existence, you will simply have a much harder time if you don't have fully upgraded flasks. And I say this as someone who stupidly went about 2/3 through my first Souls game before realizing that you could upgrade the Estus in Dark Souls 3. So, I know what I'm talking about on this one. The next one is probably like the lowest priority. Most people won't care quite enough for this, but for anyone who really wants to be as prepared as possible, you could dive into the various ways of increasing item discovery, which essentially just increases the chances of enemies dropping percentage chance items, like any weapons or armor from certain enemy types that aren't guaranteed drops. There are 3 main ways of increasing this stat. The first is the Silver Scarab Talisman, which is found in the hidden path to the Erdtree area that is used to enter the consecrated snowfields. The arcane stat on your actual character itself, and if you go into an arcane type build, you can just get higher item discovery in general if that's a main goal of yours, which also does lead into bleed builds, but I assume that From Software has probably realized just how broken bleed was in the base game and made the bosses a touch more resistant in the DLC. The third method then is the Silver Pickled Foul Foot. These are consumable items that temporarily increase item discovery. They are craftable pretty much infinitely using the Missionary Cookbook number 3, which is inside of the Smoldering Church in Caelid. The ingredients are Roa Fruit, which are common in Limgrave, Silver Fireflies, which are infinitely farmable from the Groveside Cave in Limgrave early on, respawning every time that you rest at the Grace, and the final material is 4-toed Foul Feet, which you can just get from any bird-type enemy when you kill them, and the easiest spot being just north of the Fort Church of Marika in the Weeping Peninsula area along the coast, and I recommend killing them with ranged weapons or spells. Again, this is like the preparation of all preparations, the real final frontier of wanting something to do to spend your time in Elden Ring while also technically improving your future experience. But it is a thing that you can do to prep, so I felt the need to mention it. The final recommendation that I have then to prepare yourself is, well, to check out all of the information about the expansion that has been released so far. Jog your memory when it comes to the base game's lore, watch the trailers to hype yourself up for the story, but then also look at things like the new weapon types that have been revealed and announced to be coming with the expansion and the new spells and such too. I won't go into too much detail on it here to avoid spoiling people who don't want to know all of the stuff ahead of time, but just saying that it is a good way to prepare yourself, because if you find a weapon that you know you're going to want to be using ahead of time, then you might as well just build yourself up for it beforehand, get your character in preparation for that weapon before the DLC even drops. And that's just about it for today then everyone, a guide to everything you should do to prepare yourself before the release of Shadow of the Erdtree in just like a week and a half from now. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I hope these tips help you out, and of course if you have any further tips for people that I didn't mention here, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.